backups, logs, and security rights. You know, it's kind of funny about this particular nugget because although when you're actually operating your configuration manager infrastructure, you're probably going to set up your backups and set up your security rights and maybe take a look at the logs and set those up a little bit. But for the most part, you won't be using them that much except in certain special situations like maybe a disaster recovery situation or troubleshooting a problem. But when you're looking at the configuration manager exam, these three elements are kind of hard hit. There's actually a number of, traditionally been a number of questions associated with these three elements on the configuration manager exam. And so we kind of wrap these three up into management tasks, really. The management tasks that you need to do in order to maintain the consistent running and operation and also the ability to restore your configuration manager infrastructure in the case of things going wrong. And so we wrap all these three up and talk about them here in this nugget. We're going to talk about this nugget, the concept of backups and how with configuration manager you can actually set up backups and also some other site maintenance tasks associated with the SQL database and just the site servers themselves. We'll talk about how you can set those up and enable them. We'll talk about the Site Repair Wizard, which is a tool that's used with Configuration Manager to repair the Configuration Manager, the database, and bring that site back up online if you ever have a problem, as long as you have a good backup. We'll also then shift into the concept of logs and the available logs that you have, and also some system status messages that you can bring forward to let you know the status of your components, the status of your packages and your advertisements, those sorts of things. And we'll conclude with security rights and focus specifically on the assignment of security rights to specific users. Are you giving that user a class user right, a class security right, or are you giving them an instance security right for a particular instance of that class? We'll talk about that in this nugget as well. But before we actually get to that, let's actually start with the concept of backups, and most specifically the idea of the site maintenance tasks that need to occur on your site to maintain the health of your site. I'm back here in the Configuration Manager console. If we scroll down here to site maintenance, you'll see that sub to that we have a number of things that we can do based on SQL commands, and also down here the site maintenance tasks that are available to us. Now by default, this backup config manager site server task is not enabled, and this is a task that you really want to do to your configuration manager infrastructure and to each of the site servers in that infrastructure. You want to enable this functionality and then put a location for where those backups are actually going to be stored. I want to double click this here and show you that if you click the checkbox to enable this task, it's going to give you a destination location for where you want that site and SQL backup destination to be. Now the reason why this is disabled at outset is because the configuration manager backup process can actually consume a lot of disk space. The amount of disk space is going to be roughly equal to the SQL database, and then also some additional stuff, also the configuration manager folder structure and some registry keys and all this the stuff that actually makes up configuration manager. And so by default it is disabled, but you are going to want to enable that task first of all by checking the box and choosing a location where you want to store the backup files. Now that can either be on a local drive here or via a network path or via a UNC name for some other remote location as well. Now one thing you'll notice whenever you first create this backup is if you create a folder, this is a storage location where potentially multiple different servers could back up their site information, because all of those folders are going to be subfolders to this original folder. If I click on Start here and go to my computer and actually go to this location that we just opened up here, this sccm backup location, this is just a folder that I've created here on the server. You'll see here that we have CBN backup, which is a backup for the site system that we are attempting to connect to. If I double click in here, you'll see that we have a number of things that are actually part of each individual backup. We have the site server, the folder structure that makes up that site server. We have some data files here and some log files here that make up that site server. There's the data folder and inboxes and logs and service account folders here. We also have the site database server here, which is the SQL database in its entirety for our configuration manager server. Again, if you have a very large SQL database, this can be a very large file. Even with a very small database, the database file size here is equal to about 1.3 gigs in size. So this is a very big backup that we're actually doing, even when we have a very small number of clients. We also have a backup document and also this smsbkup.log file. We'll talk about logs a little bit later, but local to each one of the backups, there is going to be a log file which gives you information about what was backed up, was it successful, or did it fail. You'll see down here at the bottom the backup task completed successfully with 0 errors, but there could be some warnings. And so this gives you an idea as to the success and health of that backup once you initiate the backup process. Let me go ahead and close these out here and go back. You'll see here that we've sent this to this sccm backup location, and it is scheduled to start at some point after 12 midnight on Sundays and start no later than 5 a.m. on Sunday, based off of whether things are prepared and ready for the backup to commence. Once we've set that up, that's going to begin to happen every Sunday as necessary. But you may be wondering, well, maybe I want to start off this backup process a little early. Maybe I want to do a custom backup or start this process and not have to wait until Sunday. Well, how do I manually start a backup and manually let that backup actually occur? You'll see I have the services node here that's already launched, already available to us. And if we scroll down here to see the SMS_site_backup service that is installed onto every site system, you'll see here that the SMS site backup service is a manual service that is currently not started. The process that you would go through to manually start a backup is simply to right-click on this service and actually start the service. What this will do is we'll begin the process, it will kick off the backup jobs, complete all the activities that need to happen in order for that backup to occur. Now, I just did that, and actually when we looked at the file structure just a second ago, that was actually what happened by manually kicking off this backup process. So you don't have to necessarily wait for that backup time to occur if you just start the process like was shown here. Now, before we actually talk about the rest of the tasks and SQL commands in here, I need to show you one file that you need to be aware of under My Computer and on the C drive. And if we go here to Program Files and Microsoft Configuration Manager, we're looking for Inboxes. We're looking for smsbkup.box, which is down here, bkup.box. And you'll see this smsbkup.ctl file. This is the control file for the backup process itself. And this is actually a text file that you can look at just inside of Notepad or any other text editor as well. This file is actually used by the backup process to allow you some customizations for that backup process as necessary. You'll see here that this is the backup control file for the site server task, the SMS backup site server task, and there are some editing blocks in here that allow you to edit certain components of that backup process only when they are surrounded by these editing blocks themselves. You'll see there are some default tokens in here that can be used to replace certain values and some destination tokens as well. Now you'll see also here we can add in custom tokens if we want, or variables. We can add in also what sorts of custom commands that we want to add in as part of that backup. Maybe we want to do something with a service or execute something or tell it to sleep for a couple of seconds. We can, if we scroll down here, add certain additional files that we want to back up, or if we want to add certain registry keys that we want to back up, or even certain custom commands that we want to add into the backup process. And so all of this allows you to further tailor that backup process so that when it occurs, whenever it needs to occur, it will also gather the other additional stuff that you need to do a successful restore of your configuration manager server using the site restore or the site repair wizard. And so be very careful with this. You'll only need to do this on the server itself, but this allows you that additional ability to do those customizations. The idea here with configuration manager backups is that by backing up the SQL database to a file and then backing up all of this stuff to a central file location, you have one place that your standard backups, if you're using NT Backup or Veritas or whatever sort of backup tool you're using, can come through and whoof, gets the entire configuration of that configuration manager server in one location so that you can restore that very, very easily much later if necessary. Now you'll see here under site maintenance there are a number of tasks that are actually configured to occur on a regular basis. And notwithstanding what this has to do with backup, these tasks are common tasks that may or may not be of interest to you whenever you're managing just the maintenance tasks associated with Configuration Manager. Those are rebuilding the database indices or monitoring keys. This is an important one for deleting aged inventory history. If your inventory after a certain number of days you want to delete that out of your database, you can do that here by double-clicking and choosing to enable that that task. Right now you're deleting data older than 90 days, and that may be too long a period of time. Maybe perhaps the dynamicism of your environment is such that stuff gets old, data gets old after only 30 days, and so you can reduce this number down as necessary. Or you can change the schedule as necessary here as well. All of these tasks you'll want to take a look at inside of each of your site servers to make sure that those site servers actually are doing those maintenance tasks on the right schedule associated for your needs. You'll see here delete inactive client discovery data or obsolete client discovery data. In this case, is never deleted because this task is not actually enabled. And so be very careful with these tasks because you may need to enable certain things so that you can again clean up your configuration manager infrastructure and the database associated with it. Also available under site maintenance is this idea called SQL commands. Under SQL commands, there are no native SQL commands that are brought forward by default, but if you want to create your own SQL commands that interact directly with the database, you can right-click and choose New SQL Commands. What this allows you to do is run specified SQL commands, stored procedures, or what have you, that interact directly with the SQL database, and then you can schedule those to occur over periods of time. You'll see here we have the same scheduling engine we saw before. Perhaps if you wanted to create a command to check to see how much space is currently being used in the database. So we can do check database space. And then we can run the stored procedure sp underscore space used. And we can log that status to a location. Maybe it's a UNC location, or maybe it's a local location, for example. We can do that here within SQL commands. Once we've created that command, we can set that command to occur over periods of time. Maybe we want to check space used, or maybe we want to just check the database, or do certain database tasks directly on that database. All those can be done here within SQL commands. This will give us a list, once we create those SQL commands, of those that are currently configured by name and whether those SQL commands are enabled for this particular configuration manager server. Notwithstanding what kind of SQL commands we actually enable for our configuration manager infrastructure, what you may have noticed if you go back here under Start and All Programs and Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager is a tool that is useful for the backup and restore process. This tool actually leverages those backups that we just discussed to actually assist with the repair process. Now, a long time ago, back in the early days of SMS, the process to repair an SMS infrastructure was actually very complicated. You had to restore the database, you had to restore all the elements of the site server that were required, you had to make sure that they linked in the proper ways. But with Configuration Manager, all of these extra steps, all of this very manual process of doing these steps has gotten much easier because the level of data, number one, that you are backing up is much greater, and number two, all of the processes that used to be manual are now automated here within the Site Repair Wizard. If we point to the site server to be repaired, in this case it's sccm nugget, and click the next button, and then choose the backup files, the location that we're looking for from the backup files, we can either restore a site or repair a site here from inside of our Site Repair Wizard. We're not going to go to the next step here because the next step actually begins that process of restoring the backup files, but this allows us the ability to repair that site or restore that site from those backup files. What we'll need to do to do this process is actually click here and click the Browse button and point ourselves to that location where we stored those backup files. In our case, it's going to be CBN backup. That will actually tell the Site Repair Wizard to go ahead and begin a site restore process from the backup files and bring that site up to the level that it was at the backup time. Now again, you have to make sure to watch your backup logs. We just showed you what the backup log was just a minute ago. You're going to want to make sure you watch those backup logs to ensure that you're getting a good, clean backup, or the Site Repair Wizard is not going to successfully be able to restore your backups. So that's a site maintenance task you're going to want to be very careful of, is ensuring that those backup files are actually occurring correctly. Now, when we talk about logs, the backup log that we just showed you is not exactly it's not the only log that's available in Configuration Manager. And in fact, as I think you'll find, if we look down through the available logs, there are a substantial number of available logs that Configuration Manager makes available for you so that you can diagnose what's going on behind the scenes inside of your infrastructure. Now, you'll see I'm back here in the Configuration Manager location, and if I click on the logs location, you'll see that there is a substantial number of logs that are available that have have all of the information about what's been going on inside of your configuration manager infrastructure. If we click on one of these, maybe wsyncmanager.log, you'll see this is our WSUS server manager and the synchronization component with the WSUS server. This actually shows us when we've done synchronizations and the process associated with those synchronizations as necessary. There are a number of other logs here too that you can check. There are software inventory processing. There is the replication manager log. There's the offer manager log. I want to show you here kind of an example of some of the logs, or just a sample of some of the many logs that are available for you. CCM is the client configuration manager. Data LDR is involved with some MIF files and some hardware inventory, getting that into the database. Any of those DDR information have their own information from the DDM log. Package information is from the disk manager log, and file maintenance is from the inbox manager log. You'll see here that there's essentially all kinds of logs that, again, tell you almost debug level information about what's going on whenever the clients are talking to the server or server components are talking to other server components. Now, I will tell you, traditionally on the configuration manager test, or the test associated with configuration manager, back even with the SMS days, the knowledge of what these logs are is very important because you may get asked some of those questions. So being aware of what these logs are, and this is only just a sample of those, being aware of what those logs are is critically important for you for the test, but is also useful for you when you're troubleshooting problems with your configuration manager infrastructure. So be aware of what these logs are and also what the other logs are available in that logs location, because you're going to need to be aware of those, again, not only for that test, but also for the process of helping to troubleshoot your configuration manager whenever you're having problems with your infrastructure. Now, one thing you may be saying is, wow, that's a lot of logs. And it is. There are a lot of logs that are in there, and we talked about all those logs too, but what may be useful for you to look at in some of the initial portions of triaging problems, or at least some of the beginning processes of trying to figure out if there are actually problems in your infrastructure, is actually looking at some of the statuses that is going on inside of your system. Configuration Manager does a very good job of helping you understand what the status is of the various elements in your system, so that you can get an idea of, well, are we actually having problems? Now, you'll see here I've scrolled down here to system status, and this system status information is actually defined here under status filter rules and status summary. But what these are these are status indicators that give you a feeling as to what the level of health is for the various components in your configuration manager system. I click down here on site status, for example, and it lets me know for my site system CBN here whether or not I'm critical or whether or not I'm doing okay with various elements. Now, you'll see here that shows that my status is critical for my component status and my site system status. If I go down here under site system status, you'll see that I have a number of elements of my site systems that are okay, but I have one element that's critical. For any of these elements, if I want to understand why they may be critical, I can right-click on any of those elements and perhaps show the messages that are related to that element. If I click the All button here, I can choose, well, show me the messages that have occurred a day ago or maybe up to a week ago, and it will pull those into a message viewer, and this message viewer will give me an understanding of all of the messages that we are currently seeing inside of our configuration manager infrastructure. Those are going to be shown as informational messages, maybe they're error messages. If I scroll over here to the right, I can see more information about those messages. You'll see here that the system health validator is not on a supported operating system. If you remember back to our network access protection widget, nugget, we talked about how the system health validator needs to be installed onto a server 2008 instance. And so these gives you a view for why you may be having problems inside of your infrastructure, and it helps you with some of these sort of red light, green light sort of understanding about the various site systems and also the various components associated with those site systems as well. This is a look at all the components that are currently installed to this site system. You'll see here sccm Nugget has a number of components that are doing just fine. There aren't any problems with those components at all. But you'll see here now that we have a number that are also in the critical state. This is, again, the system health validator associated with that network access protection. We know that there's a problem here because we've attempted to install this component to a server that's not at server 2008. Again, I can right-click this node and choose to view the messages associated with this problem and actually drill down a little bit further into understanding why these problems occur. Personally, I find actually viewing messages through the status message viewer to be somewhat easier in deciphering and determining problems and troubleshooting problems than actually digging deep into the logs. But you may find that you need to dig into those logs to find further information. But the site status information gives you sort of a high-level stoplight chart that helps you understand what the health is of your configuration manager infrastructure. The same thing holds true for advertisements and packages. And really, if you have any packages inside of your infrastructure, and you may want to know what the status is of those packages. Have those packages been updated to distribution points, and are they in process of updating? Have they been installed to distribution points? Have they failed their installation? Are they maybe retrying their installation? If I click down here, you can see that sccm Nugget for this package, which is our Adobe Acrobat package, has a source version of 1, and it is currently installed onto its correct distribution points. The last time that attempt to be copied was at this time. This is the path that it actually is installed to, and then the summary date. This also gives us a view of inside of our distribution point, that silent share that we were talking about early on in the series, what is the actual location where this package is actually installed to. In this case, it's to the subfolder CBN 4 zeros and a 3. If we look up here, we go one level up, we can see that the source version 1 was targeted to one distribution point and has been successfully installed on one distribution point as of the last summary date. The same thing holds true for advertisement status as well, but what this gives us is for the clients that we have attempted to install this package to, how many have actually received the package, how many have failed installation of the package, how many have actually started the program, how many programs have errored out, and how many have actually successed. How many times have we had success in actually deploying this package? And so once we deploy our advertisement, we can look at this advertisement status to get an understanding for how successful have we been with the deployment of this advertisement as well. And so all of your advertisements are going to be available here under advertisement status, and some information about all of those as well. And so you can use this status information to assist you with the process of understanding how healthy your packages are, how healthy your advertisements are, and also how healthy your site systems and the components associated with those site systems are as well. Our last topic in this nugget has to do with security rights. And we're not talking about overall system security. We're not talking about accounts and user accounts and machine accounts and all that. But what we're talking about is inside your configuration manager. We've sort of glossed over this to this point because we wanted us to do it all at once. All of the specific rights associated with each of the elements inside your configuration manager infrastructure. Now, if you look here, I'm going to click on the rights node that's sub to the security rights node here in our console. And you'll see that we have a number of different security rights that have been assigned to, for example, the administrator. If we scroll down here, all of these rights have currently been assigned either to the administrator or to the system account itself. And what you'll see are various class and instance security rights for the elements in our infrastructure. Now I need to stop for just a second and sort of explain the difference between class and instance security rights. As you'll see here, we have a number of different classes, for example. Maybe that class is device driver. Maybe that class is a deployment package. Maybe that class is, for example, packages or advertisements, for example. And for each of the classes, we're going to have a number of specific instances of that class. In this case, you'll see here we have 4 packages, and we have 4 instances of the use of that package, or excuse me, package security class. It's the Acrobat package, it's the configuration manager package, it's the 2 of the device manager packages that we've created here. All 4 of these are specific instances that relate to the class of package. Now, this is useful to you because you may find that you may want to give a junior administrator or a help desk person access to a particular package, for example, so that they can manipulate that particular package. Or if you have a senior admin, for example, you may want to give them access to all packages, all instances of the class of packages. And so what Configuration Manager allows you to do is define very specifically the elements in terms of class that you want to provide access to, and then even further down, the specific instances associated with those classes that you may want to as well. Let's actually drill down into a specific instance so we can show you what options are available to you. I'm going to right click here and choose properties, and you can see that for this particular instance we can choose the rights that have presently been assigned to Nugget Lab /administrator for this particular element. In this case it's delete, distribute, modify, and read are the 4 rights that are available to us. In this case, if we try to revoke the read rights, we'll actually remove all the other rights. We can remove those and actually gain access to everyone else. If we try to do the delete right, it'll add the read right. Adding distribute and adding modify will give us full rights again to that instance of this particular class. And so we can assign that for this particular user, which is the administrator. But in some cases we may want to actually assign more rights to a user or add additional class or instance rights to an existing user, for example. Here under the users node we can actually see the available users that we have in our infrastructure and either assign them users or create new users that have rights. Again, Configuration Manager is a really, really powerful tool. And if you don't have rights in Configuration Manager, or notwithstanding what rights you have in your Windows infrastructure, it may not necessarily confer to you rights in your Configuration Manager infrastructure. And so being a domain admin may not necessarily get you anything at all in Configuration Manager unless you've specifically set that to be the case. Let's right-click Users here and actually manage our Config Manager users. We're going to bring up the Config Manager user wizard here and click the Next button, and you'll see here that we can add a new user or even a new group, for example, based on this user. If we click the Browse button, that's actually going to bring up the Select User, Computer, or Group here, and we're actually going to type Domain Admins because this is a common group that we may want to provide access to. We're going to click the OK button here, and we're now going to add a new user to Configuration Manager and assign that new user, which in this case is actually a group, certain specific rights. I'm going to click the Next button here, and now you'll see that the Domain Admin group has, by default, no rights. They have no rights whatsoever to do anything in our Configuration Manager infrastructure. And so we can either choose that the listed rights here are sufficient, we can add specifically another right or modify a right if we want to, or we can potentially copy rights from an existing Config Manager user or user group. I'm going to show you how this works first by clicking the Next button. What we get when we choose the Next button here is we choose which sort of user whose rights we want to copy. Now this is very handy if you aggregate this with, for example, Windows NT groups, just like we're doing. Maybe you want to create a group that's help desk users and assign that help desk user specific rights. Then you don't have to worry about doing this inside of the Configuration Manager console. Or you may want to assign, in our case, for example, the Domain Admins group will get the same rights as the administrator account itself. And so down here, once we click the administrator account, you'll see all of the available rights that are granted to that administrator account. If I click the Next button here, that is going to then assign those rights to the administrator account. Click Next again, and you'll see now that our Domain Admin group will have the same class and instance rights as the administrator account did. If I didn't want to copy a particular level of rights, though, I could individual or instance by instance or even class by class assign those rights to a specific user account. And you'll see here that our wizard is completed successfully. I'm going to click Close here. I want to show you how you can actually do specific rights assignment as well. I'm going to go back into here into Users and back into Config Manager Users and hit click Next again. And in this case, I want to modify an existing user, and I want to modify the Domain Admins group. I'm going to click Next here, and I'm going to add another right or modify an existing one. If I click the Next button here, I can now choose to add perhaps all instances of a particular class, or I can choose specific instances of that class to assign rights to. Once I've assigned the class and or an instance, or perhaps all instances, then I give it the specific rights that are necessary. Now this can make your head swim. There's lots and lots of classes, there's lots and lots of instances associated with classes, and there are lots of rights. So be very careful not to lock yourself out or even add too many rights to the users on your system, because you may find yourself with just far too many rights and privileges to have to deal with. Again, in many cases, it's a best practice to assign class and instance rights to Active Directory groups, because then that just makes it very easy for adding and subtracting users out of those groups as necessary. Now I actually want to close this down because I want to show you one further location where you can actually do some of this manipulation. If you find it just too difficult to deal with the security rights here instead of the security rights location, you can actually do the assignment of specific instance rights here within the individual elements, for example. You can do collections in the collections node. You can do packages inside of the software distribution node. Let me go back to this Adobe Acrobat package again, and I actually want to show you how you can assign privileges to that package here within the properties view of an individual package. We went here inside of properties by right-clicking and choosing the properties node, and we click here under security. Now, if you're familiar with the security tab inside of most of the rest of Windows, it sort of looks like NTFS permissions, but these are actually the class and instance security rights that we just saw here for Configuration Manager. If I want to add additional class security rights associated with this, I can click the little star button here to actually add those rights just like I would before for a particular user. This brings up object class security right properties. I can add in, for example, a domain admin's username in here and actually give the domain admin specific rights for the elements or for the things that they need to do with this particular package. Once I do that, that's going to show up here under class security rights, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to actually have to manage some of those security rights as opposed to doing them all down within the security rights node down here at the bottom. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about not only the security rights, but we've also talked about backups and logs. We've talked about about the site maintenance tasks that you need to do in order to keep your configuration manager site as healthy as it can be. We talked about the need to enable that backups task and also some of the other tasks that are available for you as well. We talked about the site repair wizard and how if you have good backups, the site repair wizard will help you with ensuring that those backups actually can restore a configuration manager server if you have a problem where the whole world comes crashing to a halt. We talked about some of the logs and how the logs are available there for you. You need to know what those logs are for the test and also for doing some troubleshooting, as well as the system status elements that give you that sort of stoplight chart for knowing what the health is of your configuration manager infrastructure. And then lastly, we concluded with class and instance security rights and also the user wizard, so you can assign those security rights out to the various junior and senior admins out in your environment. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.